Emily Rivera grew up in the echo of engines. Her father, Miguel Rivera, owned a small garage in East San Antonio, Texas, tucked between a laundromat and an abandoned gas station. The garage smelled of motor oil, metal, and memories. Miguel never had much money, but he raised Emily with principles, wrenches, and weekend races on the radio. She was only 9 when she rebuilt her first carburetor, and by 16 she was fixing trucks for half the neighborhood. Her room was filled with engine manuals, broken radios she restored for fun, and a laptop with more bookmarked engineering pages than any library could hold. She didn't go to college, not because she couldn't, but because her father couldn't afford it. Still, Emily devoured knowledge like fuel, studying advanced engine design at night while covered in grease during the day. Her world changed the day Richard Bennett walked into the garage. Richard Bennett was the flashy CEO of Bennett Lux Motors, a luxury car dealership empire spread across Texas. He showed up with polished shoes, aviator sunglasses, and a smirk that could ignite gasoline. Parked behind him on a trailer was a Ferrari Monza SP, too sleek, blood red, and silent. "This baby won't start," he said, gesturing casually. "We've flown in guys from Houston and Vegas. No one can get it to turn over." Miguel wiped his hands and approached cautiously. "I'm not certified for Ferrari electronics, sir. Maybe it's best for your own team." Bennett looked around the garage, chuckled at the peeling paint, and then noticed Emily wiping her hands on a rag. "She yours?" he asked Miguel, nodding at her. Miguel nodded proudly. "That's my daughter," Bennett laughed. "Cute. Tell you what, let's make this fun." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Fun?" Richard leaned on the Ferrari and spoke loudly, so the gathering neighbors and onlookers could hear. "You fix this car in 24 hours, I'll offer you any position in my company. Fail, and your dad never touches a luxury engine again. Deal?" Emily glanced at her dad. Miguel hesitated, but Emily stepped forward. "Deal," the crowd murmured. Some pulled out phones to record. The challenge had been made, and she wasn't going to walk away. Bennett clapped once, like he'd just arranged a school competition. Let's see what the girl mechanic can do. The Ferrari was rolled into the garage, silent as a sculpture. Emily pulled on her gloves, grabbed her laptop and diagnostic tablet, and rolled up her sleeves. The first thing she noticed was that the car had been tampered with. The diagnostic system was locked down by a strange third-party encryption. It wasn't just a mechanical issue, it was sabotage. Someone had embedded foreign code into the Ferrari's ECU, engine control unit, creating a deadlock sequence that shut down all ignition functions. Any standard tool would fail to even access the core system. Emily's eyes lit up, not with fear, but with curiosity. "They didn't mention this was rigged," she muttered. With a whiteboard, markers, and endless focus, she began tracing. In sequence, she created a flowchart to understand the signal blocks and built a custom bypass code in Python. While others saw a luxury toy, she saw a logic puzzle wrapped in carbon fiber. She worked through the night, pausing only to drink warm Gatorade and stretch her stiff back. By 4 a.m., the code was almost cracked. The car's system blinked for the first time. Miguel sat quietly on a stool, watching her in disbelief. He had always known his daughter was brilliant, but this was something else. "You sure about this, Maya?" he asked softly. Emily smiled without looking up. He wanted a show. "I'm giving him one." The Ferrari's dash finally lit up with the red stallion logo. She input her custom override and rewired a key fuse junction using a soldering trick she'd learned from a YouTube mechanic in Berlin. The AC roared, then the headlights blinked. It was ready. At exactly 6:30 a.m., just as the Texas sky began to lighten, she slid into the leather driver's seat, turned the ignition, and the engine purred like a tiger. It wasn't just alive. It was reborn. The crowd outside heard the engine roar and rushed toward the garage. Bennett arrived minutes later, holding coffee and wearing the kind of smug smile that said he expected to win. But his face fell as soon as he heard the engine. Emily climbed out, grease on her cheek, and handed him a small USB drive. "You'll want to check your dealership logs. This car was hacked." Bennett blinked. "Excuse me?" "Your engineers missed it. Whoever sold This car installed an illegal kill switch in the ECU, she explained. Probably for insurance fraud or testing loyalty. I wrote a bypass and removed the malware. Bennett looked at the crowd. Phones were recording. He was trapped between public humiliation and admitting defeat. You did this alone? He asked. She shrugged. Just me and some electricity. The moment went viral within hours. Clips were uploaded to TikTok and YouTube with captions like "Mechanic's daughter fixes $1 million Ferrari in 24 hours," and "CEO gets schooled by small-town girl." But what really changed everything was who saw it. A man named Scott Layton, senior engineer at Tesla Motors' experimental division, had been following emerging talent from underprivileged communities. He recognized the code Emily used. It was similar to one developed by Tesla engineers to prevent autonomous vehicle hacking. He immediately contacted Miguel and requested to meet Emily within 12 hours. A jet was on standby. Emily was hesitant, unsure whether this was just another performance. But Scott was clear. You're not just a mechanic. You're a systems thinker. We've been looking for someone like you. And that was just the beginning. Emily stood quietly at the San Antonio airport, suitcase in hand, still in disbelief. The Tesla Motors had sent a private jet just for her. Her father, Miguel, had packed her toolset like a sacred ritual. "This is your brain in metal," he'd said. Tucking in a small photo of the two of them by their garage. Emily had never flown before, let alone been flown in a corporate jet. The attendant handed her a cold orange juice, and before she could sip it, they were already in the sky. Beneath her, the city lights of Texas faded, and ahead lay Palo Alto, a place that had only ever existed in documentaries or YouTube interviews. She didn't know what to expect. She didn't have a degree, a resume, or a polished LinkedIn, but she had fire in her gut and a chip full of original code. And that was enough for now. When the jet landed at the Tesla Innovation Lab, Emily expected a receptionist. Instead, Scott Layton, the lead engineer, personally greeted her at the runway. He wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans, but carried the calm confidence of a man used to building the future. "We've reviewed your Ferrari override code," he said, walking with her. "It uses a timing algorithm we haven't seen in the wild yet. Where'd you learn that?" Emily blinked. I just thought if the voltage delay was triggering the kill switch, then maybe cycling the check loop at fractional intervals could fool it." Scott grinned. "That's not beginner logic, Emily. That's cutting-edge cybersecurity protocol." Inside, the lab looked like a sci-fi dream. Robot arms, digital sandboxes, test vehicles on rotating platforms, and whiteboards scribbled with equations she could almost read. She was about to enter a world she never imagined. They handed her a badge, Emily Rivera, consultant, and took her to a secure glass pod marked Autonomous Combat Research. There sat a vehicle unlike anything she'd seen, a matte black concept car shaped like a stealth fighter. "It's a prototype for military surveillance and emergency response," Scott said. "We call it the Aegis. The problem? It keeps failing. Field diagnostics due to unpredictable AI behavior. No one could identify the root cause." Emily walked around it, studying the sensors, then opened the panel. "This interface is talking in circles," she muttered. Scott raised a brow. "You see that?" "Yeah, it's responding to its own failed commands like it doesn't know it's in a loop." She pointed out a flaw in the feedback route that everyone else had overlooked. Within an hour, she had built a script that stabilized the car's adaptive pathfinding system. The room fell silent as the vehicle self-corrected for the first time. That moment earned Emily something no certification ever could: respect, not just as a fluke success, but as someone who understood machines the way musicians understand silence between notes. Over the next few days, she collaborated with Tesla engineers, quietly becoming the mind they listened to in debugging meetings. While most used jargon and process, Emily spoke in gut instincts and simulations she built from scratch. Her ideas weren't always textbook. They were better. One evening, while sketching a diagnostic tree on a digital glass wall, she accidentally solved a data sync issue they'd been stuck on for 6 weeks. "You're not fixing code," Scott said, watching her in awe. You're designing intuition into it? Emily smiled. But inside, she was still the girl from San Antonio who had fixed carburetors with bobby pins. She never imagined that Silicon Valley's top minds would sit beside her taking notes, but her name was now echoing across the valley. Back in Austin, Richard Bennett wasn't smiling anymore. The viral video had boosted his dealership's traffic, but it had also made him look like a fool. And when Emily's Tesla achievement hit the news, he tried to spin it. Of course, I always knew she was special, he told reporters. Just gave her a chance to prove herself. But Emily had made her own path while tech media buzzed with headlines like, "Mechanic's daughter fixes AI prototype and Tesla taps untrained genius from Texas." She remained grounded. Scott offered her a 6-month contract, full pay, accommodation, and a chance to co-lead development on autonomous engine stability. Emily hesitated. "I don't have a degree," Scott shook his head. "Degrees can be bought. What you have, no one can teach." She signed the contract that night, staring at it like it was a dream printed on paper. It was more than a job, it was vindication. Still, Emily couldn't shake the dust of San Antonio from her soul. On her first paycheck, she sent half to her dad to fix the garage roof. The rest she used to buy new gear for the neighborhood kids, who tinkered with bikes and skateboards outside the old shop. Every evening she called Miguel. They didn't talk about success. They talked about engines, repairs, and how cold it was in Palo Alto. One night, as she sat on the Tesla roof garden overlooking the city lights, Scott joined her. "We've got someone coming to visit next week," he said. "Used to run R&D for DARPA. He wants to see your work." Emily sipped her coffee. "Will he be surprised I don't have a PhD?" Scott laughed. "No, he'll be surprised you haven't started your own company yet." Emily looked out at the stars and smiled quietly. She stood beside a long conference table at the Tesla Innovation Lab, a digital schematic projected beside her. In front of her sat 2 former DARPA officials, one from a private R&D security group, and the other from Lockheed Martin's Autonomous Systems Division. They had flown in just to observe her engine work. "You're telling me this hybrid fail-safe protocol was yours?" The Lockheed lead asked, half impressed, half skeptical. Emily nodded. "It reduces the risk of AI misfire in autonomous drive by over 70%. And I tested it on the Aegis prototype last week. The loop failure didn't recur." The room fell silent. She wasn't pitching, she was proving. The men exchanged glances. They weren't just impressed. They were stunned. They expected a self-taught mechanic to show passion, but they got precise logic, complete diagnostics, and embedded intuition. They knew talent when they saw it. And this was lightning in a jumpsuit. Later that night in the staff lounge, Scott handed Emily an envelope. Inside was an official offer. Lockheed Martin, through its innovation branch in partnership with Tesla, was offering her a lead engineer position, 6 figures, relocation support, and co-inventor credit on a military-patented stabilizer protocol. "You don't have to say yes," Scott said, "but they want you. Not your degree, not your resume, you." Emily stared at the letter. It felt surreal. This was the same girl who had rebuilt lawnmower engines at age 10 using scrap.